A young black maid endures horrific abuse at the hands of a wealthy racist employer, only to be cruelly kicked out when she becomes pregnant. Denied justice due to his influence and left to fend for herself, she gives birth on the streets and raises her son with strong morals and a commitment to education. Despite the odds, the boy grows up to be a brilliant student, earning a scholarship and becoming a successful CEO. While he and his mother find happiness, the father loses everything in a desperate attempt to reconnect after hearing of his son's success. A very big thanks to our returning viewers for their love and support, and to our new viewers, thanks for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe. In a grand mansion, Mr. Harrison, a wealthy businessman, lived surrounded by luxury. His house sparkled with polished floors, gleaming chandeliers, and expensive furniture. But beneath the shining surfaces of his home, there was darkness, especially when it came to how he treated the people who worked for him. His heart was as cold as the marble floors he walked on, and no one felt that coldness more than Clara. Clara was a young black woman who worked as a maid in Mr. Harrison's house. Every day, she worked from dawn till dusk, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, and cooking meals. She was quiet and kind, always doing her best, but Mr. Harrison never saw her for who she truly was. He didn't care about her hard work, her tired hands, or her gentle spirit. To him, she was just someone to boss around, and when the nights came, things got even worse. At night, Mr. Harrison's cruelty showed its ugliest face. He would come into the room where Clara was working and speak to her harshly. His voice was full of insults, as if he enjoyed making her feel small. And then, when no one else was around, he would take advantage of her, forcing her into terrible situations she couldn't escape from. Clara, with nowhere else to go, had no choice but to endure it. Clara cried herself to sleep every night, her pillow soaked with tears. She thought about her family back home, far away in a small village. They had sent her to the city, hoping she would find a better life. But here she was, trapped in a house where she wasn't treated like a person, but more like an object. The pain she felt inside her heart was unbearable, yet she stayed silent, too afraid to speak up. After all, who would believe her over a man as powerful as Mr. Harrison? But everything changed one fateful morning. Clara woke up feeling strange, dizzy and tired in a way she had never felt before. Her body ached, and she knew something was wrong. She had missed her monthly cycle and was starting to feel nauseous. It wasn't long before she realized the truth. She was pregnant. The child growing inside her was Mr. Harrison's, and her world, which was already dark, felt like it was falling apart. What would she do now? How could she tell him? Clara didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. Her life was about to change forever. Clara stood nervously outside Mr. Harrison's office, her hands trembling as she clutched her stomach. She was scared, not just for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. For days, she had been trying to gather the courage to tell him the news. But each time, fear held her back. She knew Mr. Harrison wasn't the kind of man who would respond with kindness or understanding. Finally, one evening, when the house was quiet, Clara knocked on his office door. Mr. Harrison was sitting behind his large wooden desk, surrounded by papers and his phone. He barely glanced up when she entered, his expression cold and distant. "What do you want?" he asked without looking at her. Clara swallowed hard, her voice shaking as she spoke. "Sir, I have something important to tell you." She paused, gathering her strength. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, there was silence. Mr. Harrison slowly lifted his head, his eyes narrowing as he stared at her. His expression turned from confusion to anger in an instant. "What did you say?" His voice was low, but it was filled with rage. I'm carrying your child," Clara repeated, her heart pounding in her chest. Mr. Harrison slammed his fist on the desk, making Clara jump. "You're lying," he shouted. "This can't be true." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she stood her ground. "It's true, sir. I wouldn't lie about something like this." For a moment, Mr. Harrison just stared at her, his face red with anger. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked toward her, his towering figure casting a shadow over her small frame. "Get out," he said, his voice filled with disgust. You and that child are nothing to me. I want you gone by tomorrow morning. Don't ever come back here." Clara's heart broke at his words, but she knew there was no point in arguing. She turned and left the room, tears streaming down her face. She had no idea where she would go or how she would survive, but one thing was certain: she had to leave. As Clara packed her few belongings that night, she thought about the baby inside her. She whispered to it, promising that no matter how hard things got, she would do everything in her power to protect it. But deep down, she was terrified of the uncertain road ahead. With nowhere to turn, Clara found herself standing outside in the cold, the dark streets of the city stretching before her like an endless maze. She clutched her small bag tightly, feeling utterly lost and alone. The wind bit at her skin, and the sound of distant traffic filled the air, but none of it mattered. She was homeless, pregnant, and abandoned. As she walked aimlessly, Clara couldn't stop thinking about how unfair life had been to her. She had come to the city full of hope, dreaming of a better future. But now, she was left with nothing but a broken heart and an uncertain future. She wandered for hours, her feet sore and her body aching, until she finally found a small bench in a quiet park. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for the night. Clara sat down, pulling her thin coat tightly around her as the cold seeped into her bones. She rubbed her belly gently, feeling the baby inside her, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'll find a way, I promise." Her mind raced with worry. How would she survive? How would she take care of the baby once it was born? And worst of all, how would she protect her child in a world that seemed so cruel? Clara knew she couldn't stay on the streets forever. She needed help, but where could she find it? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. A man dressed in ragged clothes sat down next to her, giving her a friendly smile. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice kind but worn from years of hardship. Clara nodded, unsure of what to say. She didn't know this man, but in that moment, his kindness was the only comfort she had. "You're not alone out here, you know," he said. "There are people who can help. You just have to know where to look." Clara looked at him, hope flickering in her heart. "Where can I go?" The man pointed down the street. "There's a shelter a few blocks away. It's not much, but they'll give you a place to sleep and maybe some food." With renewed determination, Clara thanked the man and set off toward the shelter. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and as she walked through the cold, dark streets, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what, she would find a way to give her child a better life. Clara's feet ached as she walked through the quiet streets, but her heart was set on reaching the shelter. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and as she walked through the cold, dark streets, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what, she would find a way to give her child a better life. Clara's feet ached as she walked through the quiet streets, but her heart was set on reaching the shelter. The thought of having a roof over her head, even for just one night, brought her some relief. Her mind was heavy with worry, but she reminded herself that she was no longer alone. She had her unborn baby to think about. That gave her strength. The shelter was tucked away in a corner of the city, far from the glitzy, bright lights of the wealthier neighborhoods. It was a simple building, with chipped paint and a rusty old sign that read, "Safe Haven Shelter." As Clara pushed open the door, a warm wave of heat greeted her, chasing away the cold that had settled in her bones. Inside, the shelter was bustling with people. Women, men, and children huddled in groups, some talking softly, others sitting quietly with tired faces. Clara felt nervous at first, but the warmth of the space and the kind smiles of the volunteers helped her relax a little. "Hello, dear," a woman with graying hair greeted her. She wore a worn but clean apron and had gentle eyes. "Are you looking for a place to stay?" Clara nodded, her voice catching in her throat. "Yes, please. I don't have anywhere else to go." The woman gave her a sympathetic smile and gestured toward an empty chair. "You're in the right place. Sit down, and I'll bring you some food. You look like you could use it." Clara felt a lump in her throat as she sat down. It had been a while since anyone had shown her any kindness. She rubbed her belly absent-mindedly, thinking about her baby. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Clara ate a warm meal for the first time in days. It wasn't much, just some soup and bread, but it filled her stomach and gave her a bit of energy. The shelter staff helped her find a small bed in the corner of the room. It wasn't much, but it was far better than the cold streets. As she lay down that night, Clara's thoughts were a mix of fear and hope. She knew that this shelter was only a temporary solution. Sooner or later, she would need to find a way to provide for herself and her baby. But for now, she was grateful to have a place to rest. The baby inside her kicked gently, reminding her that they were both in this together. Clara smiled softly, her hand resting on her belly. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but we'll be okay." The thought of giving up never crossed her mind. She knew life was unfair, and the world could be cruel, but she refused to let it break her. She had to stay strong, for herself and for the child she carried. Tomorrow, she will start figuring things out. As she drifted off to sleep, Clara felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. The next morning, Clara woke up early, determined to start making a plan. She had heard from some of the other women in the shelter that there were organizations in the city that helped women in her situation, women who had been mistreated, abused, and cast aside. Clara knew she had to try, no matter how hard it might be. After a simple breakfast at the shelter, Clara set out to find one of these organizations. It took hours of walking, asking for directions, and navigating the city's busy streets. But eventually, she found herself standing in front of a small office with a sign that read, Women's Justice Center. Inside, Clara met with a kind lawyer named Mrs. Thomas. She was an older woman with a stern but compassionate face, and she listened carefully as Clara told her story. How Mr. Harrison had abused her, how she had become pregnant, and how he had thrown her out with nothing. Mrs. Thomas shook her head in disgust. "It's terrible what you've been through," she said. "But you're not alone. We've helped many women like you, and we'll do everything we can to help you get justice." For the first time in weeks, Clara felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to hold Mr. Harrison accountable. Maybe she wouldn't have to face this battle all by herself. But as Mrs. Thomas explained the situation further, that hope quickly dimmed. "The problem is," Mrs. Thomas said, "Mr. Harrison is a very powerful man. He has a lot of influence in this city, and he knows people in high places. It won't be easy to fight him." Clara's heart sank. She had known it would be difficult, but hearing it from Mrs. Thomas made the reality of the situation hit harder. Mr. Harrison's wealth and power meant he could easily cover up his wrongdoings, and the legal system was often stacked against women like Clara, especially women of color. "I'm not going to lie to you," Mrs. Thomas continued. "This fight will be long, and there's no guarantee we'll win. But if you want to pursue it, we'll stand by you every step of the way." Clara sat quietly for a moment, thinking about everything she had been through. She knew the odds were against her, but she also knew that she couldn't just give up. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her child. She wanted her baby to grow up in a world where justice was possible, where people like Mr. Harrison couldn't get away with their cruelty. "I want to fight," Clara said firmly. "I want to make sure he's held accountable." Mrs. Thomas smiled, impressed by Clara's determination. "All right," she said. "We'll begin the process. But prepare yourself. It's going to be a tough road." Clara nodded, her heart steady. She was ready for the fight ahead, no matter how hard it might be. Clara left the Women's Justice Center, feeling a mixture of determination and fear. She knew the fight ahead would be tough, but she had made up her mind. She had to stand up for herself and her unborn child. As the days passed, Mrs. Thomas and her team began preparing the legal case against Mr. Harrison, gathering evidence and building a strategy. Clara, however, knew that this wasn't just about winning in court. It was about her dignity, her survival, and the future of her child. Soon, the court date was set, and the news spread quickly. Mr. Harrison's name carried weight in the community, and people began to whisper about the scandal. While some sympathized with Clara, others doubted her story. After all, how could a poor Maid take down one of the wealthiest men in the city? The day of the first court hearing arrived, and Clara's heart pounded as she walked into the courtroom. The room was filled with people, some reporters, some strangers who had come to witness the case, and others who supported Mr. Harrison. Clara's stomach churned as she saw Mr. Harrison sitting confidently at the front, surrounded by his team of expensive lawyers. Mrs. Thomas stood beside Clara, her hand gently resting on Clara's shoulder. "Remember, you're not alone," she whispered. "We're going to fight this." As the judge entered the courtroom and the proceedings began, Clara felt a surge of fear. Mr. Harrison's lawyer wasted no time in painting her as a liar, someone who was trying to take advantage of a rich man for money. They questioned her motives, her character, and even her pregnancy. They twisted her story, making her feel small and powerless. But Clara stood tall. When it was her turn to speak, she told the truth, every painful detail of what had happened. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, she gained strength. She spoke for herself, for her unborn child, and for every woman who had been mistreated and silenced. As the trial dragged on, it became clear that the system wasn't on Clara's side. Mr. Harrison's wealth and influence allowed him to manipulate the legal process, and the judge seemed more interested in protecting his reputation than seeking justice. Clara watched helplessly as the case began to slip through her fingers. The court ruled in Mr. Harrison's favor, dismissing the case and leaving Clara with nothing. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she left the courtroom. Mrs. Thomas hugged her tightly, offering words of comfort, but Clara's heart was heavy with despair. She had fought so hard, but in the end, the system had failed her. Now, she was back at square one, with no justice and no way to hold Mr. Harrison accountable. But as Clara sat outside the courthouse, wiping away her tears, she felt a small flutter in her belly. Her baby kicked, reminding her that she wasn't alone. She still had a reason to keep going. The world may have been cruel and unfair, but Clara wasn't going to give up. She would find a way to build a better life for her child, no matter how hard the journey. With the court case behind her and no money to her name, Clara found herself back on the cold streets. The shelter had been kind to her, but it was a temporary solution, and there wasn't enough space for her to stay long-term. She wandered the city, clutching her swollen belly, feeling more alone than ever. As the days passed, Clara realized how difficult it was to survive. With winter fast approaching, the nights grew colder and the streets were unforgiving. She would sit on street corners, hoping someone would offer a kind word or a bit of food, but most people hurried past her without a second glance. Occasionally, a kind soul would give her some spare change, and she would use it to buy the cheapest food she could find. One night, as Clara sat on a bench in the freezing cold, she felt the baby kick harder than ever before. She winced in pain, realizing that the time was approaching for her child to be born. But she had no home, no money, and no support. How could she bring a child into this world when she had nothing to give? Desperate and scared, Clara made her way to a small church she had passed by earlier in the day. The lights inside were dim, but she saw the door was open, and she stepped inside, hoping to find shelter from the cold. Inside, a kind priest named Father Matthew greeted her. He was an older man with a soft voice and gentle eyes. He immediately saw that Clara was in need and offered her a seat by the fire. "You look like you've been through a lot," he said softly, handing her a cup of tea. "Tell me what's troubling you." Clara poured out her story, the abuse, the pregnancy, the court case, and how she had been abandoned. Father Matthew listened quietly, his heart heavy with compassion. When she was finished, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone, my child," he said. "The church may not have much, but we will help you. You can stay here for as long as you need, and when the baby comes, we will make sure you're taken care of." Clara's heart swelled with gratitude. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't facing the world completely on her own. She would have a safe place to bring her baby into the world. It wasn't a solution to all her problems, but it was a start. The days at the church passed quietly for Clara. Father Matthew and the small group of volunteers helped her in any way they could. They provided her with warm meals, a safe place to sleep, and, most importantly, emotional support. Clara's body grew heavier with each passing day as the baby prepared to enter the world. The fear that once consumed her began to ease slightly, thanks to the kindness she received. Every night, as she lay in a small room inside the church, Clara whispered to her unborn child, telling them stories of hope and courage. She promised that no matter what happened, she would protect them and give them the best life she could. One cold, rainy evening, Clara's time finally came. The contractions hit her hard and fast, and she knew that the baby wasn't going to wait much longer. Father Matthew called for a local midwife, and within an hour, the small room was filled with the gentle, yet focused, presence of the midwife and the volunteers who were eager to help. Clara gripped the bed sheets tightly as the pain coursed through her body. It was the most intense thing she had ever felt, but she knew she had to stay strong. For hours, she labored, pushing through the pain with every ounce of strength she had left. The midwife encouraged her, whispering words of comfort and telling her how close she was. And then, after what felt like an eternity, Clara heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the cry of her newborn baby. Tears streamed down her face as the midwife placed the tiny, wriggling baby boy in her arms. Clara looked down at him, his little face red and scrunched up from the effort of being born, and felt an overwhelming wave of love. In that moment, all of her struggles, all of the pain and hardship seemed to fade away. She had a son, her beautiful, perfect son. "You did it," the midwife said softly, smiling as she cleaned up the room. "You've got a strong, healthy baby boy." Clara kissed her son's forehead, her heart filled with both joy and relief. She had brought him into the world safely, despite everything she had been through. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had won a battle. As the rain poured down outside, Clara held her son close, whispering his name for the first time. "I'll call you James. You're going to be great, my little James." Father Matthew stood at the doorway, watching the scene with a gentle smile on his face. "You're both going to be just fine," he said quietly. "This is a new beginning for both of you." Clara nodded, wiping away her tears. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she would do everything in her power to give James the life he deserved. She had been knocked down so many times, but now, with her son in her arms, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. After James was born, Clara knew that life wouldn't magically become easy. The church was kind enough to let her stay for a while, but Clara understood that she couldn't rely on their charity forever. She had to find a way to support herself and her son. Clara had no money, no job, and no real prospects. But she had something even more powerful: determination. She refused to let James grow up in poverty, struggling the way she had. She was going to make a better life for him, no matter how hard it was. Her first task was to find work. It was difficult to leave James, even for a few hours, but Clara knew she had no choice. She asked Father Matthew if anyone in the church knew of any jobs, and after a few days of searching, she was able to find a small job cleaning at a local diner. It wasn't much, just a few hours a day, scrubbing floors and washing dishes, but it was something. And with that little bit of income, Clara was able to buy diapers and a few basic necessities for James. Each day was a struggle. Clara would wake up early, feed James, and leave him in the care of one of the older women from the church while she went to work. After her shift, she would return to the church, exhausted, and spend the rest of the day caring for James. There were moments when Clara felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all, but every time she looked at James, she found the strength to keep going. The hardest part was balancing her exhaustion with the need to provide a safe, loving environment for her son. She wanted to give James the best of everything, but all she had to offer was her love and a few scraps of money. Still, Clara never let herself sink into despair. She had fought too hard to give up now. In those quiet moments, after James had fallen asleep in her arms, Clara would think about the future. She dreamed of a better life for her son, a life where he wouldn't have to worry about where his next meal would come from, a life where he could go to school and follow his dreams. Clara was determined to make that dream a reality, no matter how many obstacles stood in her way. Every day, she saved every penny she could, planning for the day when she and James would finally have their own place. It wasn't going to be easy, but Clara knew that as long as she had James, she had something worth fighting for. Months passed, and though life was tough, Clara and James had settled into a routine. The little boy grew stronger with each passing day, and his laughter was the brightest sound in Clara's world. Despite the difficulties, Clara never let her spirits sink too low. She always found joy in the small things. James' first smile, his tiny hands gripping her finger, or the way he would babble excitedly whenever she came home from work. But as much as Clara loved her son and their time together, she knew that their life couldn't continue like this forever. The church shelter, though welcoming, wasn't a permanent home. Clara longed for a space of their own, a place where James could grow up in peace and stability. She also wanted to give him more than just love. She wanted him to have the opportunities she had never had. One morning, as Clara was finishing her shift at the diner, she overheard two customers talking about a local scholarship program for single mothers. The program offered training and education to help women like her find better-paying jobs. Clara's heart raced as she listened to their conversation. This could be her chance, a way to improve her situation and provide a better future for James. As soon as her shift ended, Clara rushed back to the church and told Father Matthew about the program. He was overjoyed at the news and encouraged her to apply. "It sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Clara," he said. "You've worked so hard, and you deserve a break. This could be the key to unlocking a better future for you and James." Clara was hesitant at first. The idea of going back to school, after all these years, was intimidating. She had barely finished her own education before working as a maid for Mr. Harrison, and she doubted whether she could keep up with the coursework. But the thought of giving James a better life gave her the courage to try. Over the next few days, Clara gathered all the documents she needed and submitted her application for the scholarship program. Weeks passed, and as the waiting stretched on, Clara's anxiety grew. She tried not to get her hopes up, but deep down, she knew how much this opportunity meant. It could change everything. One evening, as she was feeding James, there was a knock on the church door. Father Matthew answered, and Clara heard him talking to someone outside. Moments later, he returned with a letter in his hand, a wide smile on his face. "It's for you, Clara," he said, holding the letter out to her. Clara's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from the scholarship committee, congratulating her on being accepted into the program. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read the words. She had done it. She had been given a chance to turn her life around. "Oh, Father," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe it." "You deserve it," Father Matthew said kindly. "You fought so hard for this, Clara. And now, you have a real chance to build a better life for yourself and James." Clara hugged James tightly, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. For the first time in a long time, she felt like things were finally starting to look up. This was the break she had been waiting for, the opportunity to give James the life she had always dreamed of. With the scholarship, Clara would be able to attend classes, learn new skills, and eventually get a job that paid more than just a few dollars an hour. She would be able to provide for James in ways she never thought possible. The road ahead was still long, but Clara knew she could face it. She had survived so much already, and with this new opportunity, she felt stronger than ever. She was ready to take on the next chapter of her life, with James by her side. Clara's first day of school was nerve-wracking. As she stood outside the classroom, clutching her bag, she felt a surge of doubt. What if she wasn't smart enough? What if she couldn't keep up with the other students? She hadn't been in a classroom in years, and the thought of sitting through lectures and doing homework felt daunting. But then she thought of James, his bright smile, his innocent eyes, and she reminded herself why she was doing this. She wasn't just doing it for herself. She was doing it for him. She wanted to give him a life free from the struggles she had faced. Taking a deep breath, Clara pushed open the door and walked into the classroom. The room was filled with other women, some older, some younger, but all of them there for the same reason. Clara found a seat at the back and sat down, her heart still pounding. The class began, and as the teacher started to speak, Clara's nerves slowly began to fade. The material wasn't as difficult as she had feared, and the teacher was kind and patient. As the days passed, Clara found herself settling into the routine. She attended her classes during the day and worked her shifts at the diner in the evenings. It was exhausting, but Clara didn't mind. She was doing this for James, and that thought kept her going. Father Matthew continued to watch James during the day while Clara was at school. Every night, She would return to the church, tired but determined, and spend the evening with her son. Though she missed spending more time with him, she knew that this sacrifice was for his future. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's confidence grew. She excelled in her studies, earning high marks in all of her classes. The other women in the program became her friends, and they supported each other through the challenges they faced. For the first time in years, Clara felt like she was part of a community, people who understood her struggles and stood by her side. Months passed, and Clara's life began to take on a new rhythm. School and work filled her days, and James was growing fast. Each day, she marveled at how much her son was changing. His first few words filled her with pride, and his infectious laughter made every hard day worthwhile. Clara found joy in their little routine, even though the challenges of balancing work, school, and motherhood were exhausting. But as difficult as it was, Clara felt like she was finally climbing her way out of the darkness. Her grades were excellent, and her teachers were impressed with her dedication and hard work. She had made friends with the other women in her program, and they often helped each other with schoolwork or watched each other's kids while they studied. Clara's life was still a struggle, but it no longer felt hopeless. One afternoon, as Clara was leaving her class, she noticed a flyer on the bulletin board for an internship program. Clara's heart raced as she read the details. An internship like this could open so many doors. It could lead to a full-time job, better pay, and a way out of her current situation. That night, as she fed James and rocked him to sleep, Clara thought about the flyer. She knew the competition would be tough, but the thought of being able to give James a better future filled her with determination. She couldn't let fear hold her back. The next morning, Clara applied for the internship. She prepared her resume, wrote a heartfelt cover letter, and submitted it with fingers crossed. The waiting felt endless, but after a few weeks, she received a phone call that would change everything. She had been selected for an interview. Clara could hardly believe it. Her heart pounded with excitement and nerves. This was her chance, and she couldn't let it slip away. She spent the next few days preparing, practicing her answers to common interview questions, and putting together her best professional outfit. The day of the interview arrived, and Clara felt a mixture of excitement and fear as she walked into the towering office building. The receptionist greeted her warmly, and soon she was escorted to a large conference room where 3 interviewers sat, waiting to speak with her. Clara took a deep breath and smiled as she introduced herself. The questions came quickly, but Clara remained calm, answering each one with confidence and honesty. She talked about her journey, her determination to build a better life for her son, and her passion for learning. The interviewers listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. When the interview ended, Clara left the building feeling both hopeful and anxious. She had given it her best shot, but now all she could do was wait. A week later, Clara received a phone call that nearly brought her to tears. She had been selected for the internship. She had done it. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. That evening, Clara sat with Father Matthew, sharing the news. He smiled warmly, his eyes filled with pride. "You've come so far, Clara. I always knew you had it in you." Clara hugged him tightly, her heart full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," she said. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Father Matthew shook his head. "You did this, Clara. You and James have a bright future ahead of you, and I have no doubt that you'll succeed." As Clara sat with James that night, watching him sleep peacefully, she felt a deep sense of hope. The road had been long and hard, but now, for the first time, she could see a future that was bright and full of promise. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building a life, a real life for herself and her son. The internship was everything Clara had hoped for and more. The company was large and fast-paced, and at first Clara felt a little out of her depth. But as the weeks went by, she quickly found her footing. She learned new skills, made valuable connections, and impressed her supervisors with her work ethic and determination. Every day was a learning experience, but Clara was up for the challenge. She knew that this was her ticket to a better life for James. Her supervisors took notice of her progress, often complimenting her on how quickly she adapted to the role. But the biggest challenge came from balancing the internship with everything else in her life. Between her internship hours, her remaining classes, and her responsibilities as a mother, Clara was stretched thin. There were nights when she barely slept, staying up late to study or finish assignments. But even on her most exhausting days, Clara kept going. Every time she looked at James, she was reminded of why she was doing this. One day, Clara's supervisor, Mr. Reynolds, called her into his office for a meeting. She felt a knot of nerves in her stomach as she sat down, unsure of what to expect. "Clara," Mr. Reynolds began, "I've been really impressed with your work over the past few months. You've shown a lot of dedication, and you've made great contributions to our team." Clara's heart raced as she listened, her hands trembling slightly. "We're going to have an opening for a full-time position soon," Mr. Reynolds continued. "I'd like to offer it to you." Clara could hardly believe what she was hearing. A full-time position? This was more than she had ever dreamed of. It was a chance to truly turn her life around, to provide stability for herself and James. "I thank you, Mr. Reynolds," Clara stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "This means so much to me. I won't let you down." Mr. Reynolds smiled warmly. "I know you won't, Clara. You've earned this." As Clara left the office, she felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. She had done it. She had landed a full-time job. It wasn't just any job either. It was a career, something she could build a future on. That evening, Clara sat with James in their small room at the church, holding him close and whispering to him about the life they were going to have. They would soon move into a home of their own, no longer relying on charity. Clara would be able to give James the childhood he deserved, full of love, opportunity, and stability. Clara's heart soared as she stood outside the small apartment that would become her and James' new home. It wasn't much, just a modest two-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. But to Clara, it was everything. It was the first real home they had ever had, a place where James could grow up safe and happy. The day she signed the lease, Clara felt like she was finally stepping into the life she had fought so hard for. After moving in, she spent every spare moment turning the empty apartment into a cozy home for James. She found secondhand furniture, painted the walls a cheerful light blue, and hung up pictures of the two of them. Watching James play in their new living room, giggling as he crawled around and explored, made Clara's heart swell with joy. This was what she had dreamed of, her own space, where she could raise her son in peace. But life wasn't without its challenges. Balancing her new full-time job with caring for James was still difficult. Clara had to juggle work deadlines, house chores, and making time for James, who was growing more energetic by the day. There were nights when she stayed up late to finish work or clean up after a long day, only to be woken early by James' cries. Yet despite the exhaustion, Clara felt a sense of purpose. Every moment of hard work was for her son. She found a daycare nearby, where she could leave James while she worked, and the ladies there were kind and understanding. Knowing that James was in good hands gave Clara peace of mind during the day, allowing her to focus on her job. One evening, after putting James to bed, Clara sat in the quiet living room and let herself reflect on how far she had come. From being homeless and pregnant to now having a stable job and a home, it all felt like a dream. She was proud of herself, and most importantly, she was proud of the mother she had become. As she looked at the pictures on the wall, Clara smiled, thinking about the future. She dreamed of all the things she wanted to give James: good education, travel, and a life full of opportunity. And with her new job, those dreams no longer felt out of reach. The next day, Clara's supervisor, Mr. Reynolds, called her into his office. She had been working at the company for several months now, and he had noticed her continued dedication. "You've been doing excellent work, Clara," he said. "There's a new project coming up, and I want you to lead it." "I'd love to," she replied, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling up inside. Clara's eyes widened in surprise. Leading a project? She had never expected to be given such a responsibility, especially so soon. But the thought of taking on this new challenge excited her. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Mr. Reynolds nodded with a smile. "I know you'll do great." That night, Clara celebrated the news with James. She danced around the living room with him in her arms, spinning him around as he giggled, his tiny hands reaching for her face. "We're going to be okay, James," she whispered, kissing his forehead. We're building something beautiful. You and me. As the years went by, Clara's life continued to improve. Her career blossomed, and she became a respected member of the company. She saved enough money to start putting aside for James' future, dreaming of the day when he would go to college and make something great of his life. James grew into a bright, curious boy. He excelled in school, just as Clara had hoped, always eager to learn and make his mother proud. Clara made sure he knew how much she loved him and how proud she was of his hard work. But as their life together thrived, a shadow from the past lingered. Clara hadn't heard from James' father, Mr. Harrison, in years. She had long since accepted that he would never be a part of their lives, but deep down, she sometimes wondered what had become of him. One afternoon, as Clara was finishing up work, she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost embarrassed. "Clara," the man said. It's Mr. Harrison." Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't heard his voice in so long, and hearing it now brought back a flood of memories. Memories she had tried so hard to forget. I don't know if you'll want to hear this," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice shaking. "But I've lost everything. My business, my money, it's all gone." Clara felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to hang up, to walk away and never look back. But another part of her felt a sense of closure in hearing those words. The man who had once held so much power over her had fallen, just as she had risen. I want to meet my son," Mr. Harrison said quietly. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She didn't know what to say. "James doesn't need you," she said firmly. "He has me. I've raised him on my own, and he's a wonderful boy. He's happy, Mr. Harrison. I don't think you deserve to be a part of his life." There was silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Harrison's voice, once so confident and arrogant, now sounded broken. "I understand," he whispered. "I'm sorry for everything. I just wanted to see him." Clara hung up, her hands trembling. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to let Mr. Harrison disrupt the life she had worked so hard to build for James. He had lost everything, but she and James had gained a new life. A life built on love, perseverance, and hope. Time flew by, and soon James was no longer the little boy who ran around the apartment in playful bursts. He had grown into a tall, bright young man with dreams of his own. His curiosity about the world was boundless, and his hunger for knowledge never seemed to fade. Clara watched with pride as James excelled in school, his grades earning him the admiration of his teachers and peers alike. But there was something even more incredible waiting for James that would change the course of his life. One day, after a long day of classes, James came running home, breathless and wide-eyed. "Mom!" he exclaimed, waving a letter in his hand. "Mom, you won't believe it." Clara, who was preparing dinner, turned to face her son, her heart racing as she saw the excitement in his eyes. "What is it, James?" James handed her the letter, practically jumping up and down with excitement. As Clara unfolded the paper, her eyes widened in disbelief. It was an acceptance letter from a prestigious university offering James a full scholarship to study engineering. He had always loved science and maths, and now his hard work had paid off. "I got the scholarship, Mom!" James shouted, wrapping his arms around her tightly. "I'm going to college." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her son. She had always known James was destined for greatness, but seeing this dream come true filled her heart with overwhelming joy. "I'm so proud of you, James," Clara whispered, holding him close. "You've worked so hard for this, and now all your dreams are coming true." That night, they celebrated. Clara cooked James' favorite meal, and they laughed and talked about what the future would hold. For the first time in years, Clara allowed herself to dream even bigger for both her and James. The boy she had raised on her own, with nothing but love and determination, was going to college with the world at his feet. The day James left for college was bittersweet for Clara. On the one hand, she was overjoyed that her son was embarking on such an incredible journey. But on the other hand, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of sadness at the thought of him leaving home. As they packed up James' belongings and loaded them into the car, Clara smiled through her emotions, determined not to show how much she would miss him. James, too, seemed both excited and nervous about the new adventure ahead. "You're going to do amazing things, James," Clara said as they drove to the university campus. "I know it." James nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done any of this without you." They arrived at the bustling campus, filled with new students and their families. As they carried boxes into James' dorm room, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. James was stepping into a whole new world, one filled with endless possibilities. After they finished unpacking, James turned to his mother with a smile. "I'll call you every day," he promised. Clara laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Just don't forget to study," she teased. "But yes, call me whenever you can." As they said their goodbyes, Clara hugged James tightly, knowing that this was a moment she would cherish forever. Her little boy had grown into a man, and now it was his turn to chase his dreams. As she drove back home, Clara felt a sense of peace. She had raised James to be strong, smart, and kind, and now he was ready to take on the world. College life suited James well. He quickly became known as one of the brightest students in his engineering program, earning high marks in all his classes. He joined various student organizations, made friends, and took on leadership roles in school projects. His professors admired his intelligence and dedication, and soon, James was being offered internships at major companies. Each opportunity brought him closer to his dream of becoming a top engineer. Back at home, Clara followed his progress with pride. She and James stayed in close contact, with phone calls and video chats keeping them connected despite the distance. Every time they spoke, Clara could hear the excitement in James' voice as he talked about the new things he was learning and the people he was meeting. Then one day, James received an offer that took him by surprise. He had been selected for an exclusive internship at a renowned tech company. It was an opportunity that would give him invaluable experience and a foot in the door to the industry he loved. James couldn't agree more. He had come so far, and every step of the way, his mother had been there, supporting him and cheering him on. As the years passed, James graduated with honors and was immediately offered a job at a leading tech company. His hard work had not gone unnoticed, and soon he climbed the ranks, becoming a leader in his field. Eventually, James achieved something he had always dreamed of. He became the CEO of a successful company, using his knowledge and skills to help create innovative technology that improved people's lives. Through it all, Clara was by his side, her heart full of pride as she watched her son achieve things she had never imagined possible. James had built a life full of success, and together, they had created a story of resilience, love, and triumph. As James settled into his role as CEO, life seemed to be perfect. His company flourished, and he was making a real difference in the tech industry. Clara often visited him at work, beaming with pride as she saw the impressive office he had created. Each time she walked through the glass doors, she felt a rush of joy knowing that all her sacrifices had led to this moment. But one afternoon, while James was reviewing some documents in his office, he received an unexpected call. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello?" he said, trying to keep his tone professional. "James?" The voice on the other end sent a chill down his spine. It was his father, Mr. Harrison. James felt a mix of emotions surge through him: anger, confusion, and disbelief. "What do you want?" he replied, keeping his voice steady. "You have no right to call me. I know I don't, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I've heard about your success," Mr. Harrison said, his voice shaking. "I just want to see you." James clenched his fists. "Why now? After all these years? You chose to walk away from us. You never cared about me or my mother." "I know, and I'm sorry," Mr. Harrison said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "I lost everything, James. I've been searching for a way to make amends, but I understand if you don't want to hear from me again. I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished." James felt a whirlwind of emotions battling inside him. He had spent years wanting to prove himself and to show that he was more than just the son of a wealthy man who had abandoned him. Now, hearing those words from Mr. Harrison felt like a punch to the gut. "Why should I believe you? What do you want from me? James asked, his voice filled with bitterness. I want to meet you face to face, Mr. Harrison replied. Please give me a chance to talk. I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of your future. James hesitated, the weight of the moment heavy on his heart. After a long pause, he finally responded, I need time to think about it. Don't call me again until I'm ready. With that, James hung up, feeling the rush of emotions collide within him. He hadn't expected to hear from his father again, and now that he had, he didn't know what to do. That evening, he called Clara, wanting to share what had just happened. He needed her support more than ever. Mom, you won't believe who just called me, he said, his voice tight. Clara sensed the tension in his tone. Who? What's wrong, James? It was my father. He wants to meet me. Clara felt her heart sink. She had always known that this day might come, but she had hoped it wouldn't. What did you tell him? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. I told him I needed time to think, James replied. I don't know how to feel about it. I can't imagine how hard this is for you, Clara said softly. But remember, you're your own person. You've built a beautiful life without him, and you don't have to let him back in if you don't want to. I know, Mom, James said, his voice trembling. But part of me wonders if I should at least hear him out. Just promise me you'll be careful, Clara urged. You've come so far, and I don't want anyone to hurt you again. James nodded, feeling grateful for his mother's unwavering support. I will, Mom. Thank you. After days of contemplation, James finally decided to meet his father. He wasn't sure what would come of it, but he knew that he needed to confront the man who had caused so much pain in his life. The meeting was set for a small cafe near the university. As James arrived, he felt a knot in his stomach. Memories of his childhood flooded his mind, memories of abandonment and hurt. When he walked into the cafe, he spotted Mr. Harrison sitting at a corner table, looking older and worn. His once immaculate suit was slightly rumpled, and there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. James approached the table, feeling a mixture of anger and curiosity. I'm here, he said, taking a seat across from his father. Thank you for meeting me, James, Mr. Harrison began, his voice filled with emotion. I know I don't deserve your time, but I wanted to explain myself. James crossed his arms, his heart pounding. You walked away from us. What could you possibly say that would make this any better? I was a coward, Mr. Harrison admitted, looking down at his hands. When I found out about your mother's pregnancy, I panicked. I thought money could fix everything. I thought I could bury my mistakes under wealth and success. But I lost everything. My business, my family, and now I realize I lost the chance to know you. James listened, his heart torn between anger and the faint hope of understanding. You think you could just show up and make everything okay? He asked, his voice steady. You didn't care about me or my mother when we needed you most. I know, Mr. Harrison replied, his voice cracking. But I've changed. I've been searching for a way to reconnect, to understand who you are. I can't change the past, but I want to be a part of your life if you'll let me. James felt a surge of emotions, frustration, confusion, and even a hint of sympathy. He didn't want to forgive Mr. Harrison so easily, but he couldn't deny that a part of him wanted to understand this man who had abandoned him. Why should I trust you? James asked, his eyes locked onto his father's. What if you disappear again? I promise, I won't, Mr. Harrison replied earnestly. I have nothing left to lose. I just want a chance to show you that I've changed. James felt a heavy silence settle between them. After all the pain and betrayal, could he really allow his father back into his life? As the weight of the moment hung in the air, James knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing, if he chose to embark on it at all. In the following days, James found himself consumed by thoughts of his father. He talked to Clara about it, seeking her advice and support as he processed the emotional weight of the meeting. I don't want to be angry, he confessed to her one evening over dinner. But every time I think about him, I remember how he treated us. It feels unfair to just let it go. Clara nodded, understanding the complexity of his feelings. It's okay to feel angry, James. It's a part of healing. Just remember that you are in control of your life. If you decide to give him a chance, make sure it's on your terms. James took her words to heart. He wanted to approach this situation with caution, knowing that he had the power to set boundaries. After reflecting on everything, he made a decision. The next day, he called Mr. Harrison. "I'm willing to meet again," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "But I need to be clear about my boundaries." "Of course," Mr. Harrison replied, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I want to hear about your life since you left, and I want to know what you've learned," James continued. "But I won't tolerate any manipulation or attempts to sway me. This is my life now, and I want to keep it that way." "I understand, James," Mr. Harrison said earnestly. "I'm here to listen." They agreed to meet again, and as James hung up, he felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He was stepping into uncharted territory, but this time he was prepared to stand his ground. On the day of their second meeting, James felt a whirlwind of emotions. He arrived at the cafe, and as he waited for his father, he practiced what he wanted to say. This meeting would be different. He wouldn't just let Mr. Harrison speak. He needed to voice his feelings and ask the questions that had haunted him for years. When Mr. Harrison arrived, he looked even more nervous than before. His hands trembled slightly as he took a seat across from James. "Thank you for meeting me again," he said softly. James took a deep breath. "I want to understand how you went from being a wealthy businessman to where you are now. How did you lose everything?" Mr. Harrison sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's a long story, but I'll be honest with you. I became overconfident. I thought I was untouchable. I made bad investments and surrounded myself with people who were only interested in my money. When the market crashed, I lost everything overnight." James listened intently, trying to absorb the weight of his father's words. "And what about Mom? You never thought about how your actions would affect us." "I didn't think of anyone but myself at that time," Mr. Harrison admitted, his voice trembling. "I was selfish and scared. When your mother needed me most, I ran away. I thought I could handle it all on my own, but I only ended up hurting everyone in the process." James felt a knot tighten in his chest. It was painful to hear his father admit his failures, but a part of him wanted to know more. "So, you've spent all these years regretting your decisions? Why now? Why do you want to reach out to me after all this time?" "I've spent years searching for redemption," Mr. Harrison said, his eyes downcast. "When I lost my wealth, I lost my identity. It was only then that I realized that family is more important than money. I want to make amends, even if it takes time." James's heart was a storm of emotions. It was hard to reconcile this man sitting in front of him with the person who had left him and Clara to fend for themselves. "It's not easy for me to trust you, you know," he replied cautiously. "You hurt us both deeply. I need to know that you're serious about this." "I understand completely," Mr. Harrison said, his voice earnest. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right away. I just want the chance to prove that I can be a better person and a better father. If you let me, I want to be involved in your life." James studied his father's face, searching for sincerity. "What do you expect from me?" he asked. "Do you think I'll just welcome you back with open arms?" "No," Mr. Harrison replied firmly. "I'm not asking for that. I know I have to earn your trust, and I'm willing to put in the effort. I just want the opportunity to be a part of your life if you'll let me." James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "This is going to take time, and I need you to understand that," he said finally. "If we move forward, we'll need to take small steps. I want to know you better, but it's going to be a long road." Mr. Harrison nodded, relief washing over his face. "I can accept that. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." As they continued to talk, James found himself opening up about his life, sharing his successes and struggles. He talked about Clara, the sacrifices she had made, and how she had been his rock. Mr. Harrison listened intently, his expression changing as he heard about the woman who had raised his son alone. "I've heard so much about your mother," Mr. Harrison said quietly. "She's an incredible woman. I regret how I treated her too. I wish I could go back and change everything." James felt a flicker of empathy as he saw the sadness in his father's eyes. "You can't change the past," he replied. "But if you really mean it, you have to show her respect if you want to be a part of my life." "I will," Mr. Harrison promised. "I'll do everything I can to make things right." "Do you think James is doing the right things? If you are in his shoes, what will be your next move?" I will be waiting for you in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories.